Hey, Katrina here from Scrappy Horses. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm working on something a little different. I'm working in a sort of family history book. I purchased some old books at a library sale, and this one had a great title. And I thought this would be perfect for a sort of family book with lots of old pictures and stories. So I've only done a couple of pages in it. This is only my second page. And this one is about my great-grandpa, Grandpa Oliver. He was a man who was very, very special to my father. So I really enjoyed doing this page, kind of in honor of my dad's love and respect for his favorite grandpa. Grandpa Oliver was an engineer, and he did quite a bit of drawing like what you see in this steampunk paper. I've collected some different pieces of paper. I like that black graph looking, and that came out of this Wild Rose collection. The name of the book is My Long Trip Home. I've never read it. I'm sure it was a great book. And this is the first page I did. This is a picture of my grandparents. So I'm backing up quite a few pages to put Grandpa Victor's father in, Grandpa Oliver, because I know I'm going to be ripping out some pages in between to make room. All right, so I'm going to get started on this page with some of the Tim Holtz tissue paper, and I will link the names of all these products below. I believe this one might be called something like Type or something like that, Script. I'm not sure. I'm going to rip off the edges, and I'm going to be using some Collage medium then to just adhere this into the book. Now, I had it pretty close to the edge there, and I couldn't really rip it. So sometimes when I do that, I just pull a pair of scissors and I just sort of, I call it skim it. Just skim it along the top of the paper so it just sort of rips the top of it, and then I just sort of shred it away. And it gives it a really distressed look, and I like that look. This is a piece of plastic just from a cereal box, to keep cereal in, and I'm just sticking it in the page behind just to protect all the pages behind it. And I'm going to go ahead and cover it with my Collage medium. This is, I believe it's Tim Holtz Collage medium. And then I will stick down the paper, trying to get out as many wrinkles as possible. And get the scruffy little edges down, and I'll bring more Collage medium in and just paint over the top of that. Now you're going to see me work on this in sections because I'm a multitasker. So I will set this aside now, let it dry, and I'll go ahead and I'll start working on something else. So here we are working on the inking of the papers. So I'm just sort of ink distressing. I felt like this paper was a little bit gray for the other papers I was going to use. And at first I thought I was going to put those little typing keys on this page too. I decided it was just getting too busy. So I left that page off. This particular piece of paper here is actually from Digital Delights by Luby Lou. And it's a steampunk digital paper pack. I'm not sure that that's available anymore, but I will list it below. Here's the picture of Grandpa Oliver, and there's the paper with the kind of black grid on it. I had cut some letters from part of it before, and I used that piece to actually back the steampunk paper. Now this is a little quill, and I believe it is from MHK, but again, I'll link it below and let you know for sure. I'm just going around this little pen with some ink. I cut this in Cricut Design Space, and as well as the little ink pot there also. This piece behind it is a an offset that I created in Cricut Design Space, and I'm just inking it up just to give it a little bit of color. Sometimes it's easier just to cut everything in white and then move on from there and color it myself than it is to keep changing colors of paper. And it also gives it a little bit of texture from the sponging it with the ink. There's that little ink pot or ink jar, and we're going to do some fun things with that in a little bit. And I'm also coloring up the offset on it also. I'm using offsets with those in a light color just because I want them to show up. Okay, here are those little gears, and I thought this was an interesting cut below in Cricut Design Space also, this bottom one that you're seeing on your screen. I've pulled this stamp, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some Versamark and just stamp a little bit of this typewritten verbiage over these gears. I'm just doing it to give it a little bit of texture. And what I'm about to do next is something a little different. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but I do it quite a bit and I like the way it turns out, so it's something you might want to try. I like to mix my embossing powders. Now, when I was teaching some classes at our local library, I bought a bunch of these little jars, these little clear jars, to put things in for students. Well, sometimes when I mix powders, I just grab some of these jars and I mix up a couple of colors. Here I've picked up some champagne color as well as some white, because I wanted it to be really light colored champagne, okay? Now the powders don't really mix together, obviously, because they're little granules and they're gonna stay apart. But when you go ahead and heat emboss them, you get a little bit of both colors. Now, this is really fun when you do something with like a bronze and you add it with some gold and that kind of thing. You end up with almost kind of a rustic sort of look. This, I was just going for a look that was not so dark as the champagne, but not so light as white. I'm going to come in now and add just a little bit of this print to the little pot of ink. Again, it's just to give it a little bit of texture. It's not about being able to really see script or anything else. My camera clicked off, so you're not going to get to see me actually heat emboss, but you can see in the later pictures, you can see what it looks like after it was heat embossed. I am now adding my picture to the background paper. So there he is. There's Grandpa Oliver getting added to that piece of black grid. Here's the piece that is a leftover piece of paper. It's out of that same paper. I very seldom throw anything away, and my craft room looks like it. I'll be honest. It's just, I have heaps of things that probably most people would throw away. But I was able to use this as a piece of backing paper for this other piece, and I didn't have to cut a new piece of paper. I'm always so excited when I don't have to cut new paper to back things. You can see the type key paper. I have already backed that above. Again, I'm not going to be using that paper. It's great paper, so be looking for it in another project because I'll use it somewhere. I'll go ahead and set that aside, and I will start working on some of the die cuts. I'm going to use some fabric tack, and I'm going to start gluing the top pieces to the offset pieces. Again, I like to use offset pieces. It just makes it stand off, and I just like the way the different layers look. I'm going to add a little ink around this black piece just because it had white edges. And I'm adding some, it's actually not black, it's actually a slate gray color. The ink is from Close to My Heart. That color is probably retired, but I'll list it below. I'm going to go ahead and adhere all these little pieces together. There you can see the embossing on that piece. Just gives it a little texture, a little bit of something extra to see. I think old writing utensils and desk and office supplies are really fun. I inherited some from my grandparents, and I actually have some old pens that almost look like this. I need to find something to do with those. Maybe a canvas or something with a picture of my grandma, and then glue one of those old pens might be interesting. Okay, back to the actual book page. It is now dry, and you can see the piece of Holtz tissue paper on here now. I'm going to go ahead, and I think this is a little too white for my picture. So what I'm going to do is I've got some cashmere ink, and I'm just sort of blobbing it onto a stamp block. And now I'm going to add some pearl shimmer paint. I think it's Blick. And I'm just going to mix that up, and that's going to change my color. Now, I'll be honest, I do have some colored paints in my collection, but I usually buy white or a very light color. Then I color it this way. It cuts down on how much stuff I have in my craft room, and it also just lets me blend the exact color that I'm looking for. So here again, here's another example. I'm just putting that ink right onto my stamp block. A little bit of this paint. I didn't get quite enough the first time, so that's why I'm doing it again. And I mix it all up, and then I can paint it on like so. Now, I liked this, and I thought the color was nice. However, it was sort of shiny. I didn't really think that through. But I'm going to knock it back with some gesso later on. First, I'm going to come in with this Distress paint, Tim Holtz. And I'm going to come in and use it on this clock stencil. And you'll see that I just sort of put it on there, dab it on, and then I use my finger to sort of rub it in, just to kind of get in those little holes. I really like clocks. I come from a family who loves clocks. My grandparents had so many clocks in their home, and on the hour, it was crazy at their house. I mean, crazy. They had cuckoo clocks, and they had chiming clocks, and they would all go off, and it was really quite fun. It was a lot of fun listening to all those different sounds as a kid. I think it drove my dad a little crazy, but as a kid, it was fun. Now, you're going to see me cut this sponge into a sixth of it. The sponge is from Close to My Heart, and I love to use sponges for all kinds of different things. And here I'm going to use it to knock back that glossy white that I'm getting, that shimmery look that I got from that paint that I used before. This is another Blick paint, and I'm going to go ahead and just water it down a little bit. That's just a spray bottle there. So I'm going to mix up the paint with some water, and I'm going to bring that in. I wanted to knock back the black in this Tim Holtz tissue too. It was just too much it was just overpowering. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to bring in this paint. All right, I brought it in and I quickly saw that, oh, this is too yellow for me. So I brought in some white gesso and mixed up with it. I'm leaving in all my trial and error here so that you can see that there are ways to fix just about anything. So I'm going to come in, add that white gesso, and that's going to lighten this up and give it more of a beige look. It kind of takes away some of that yellow, and I'm just going over the top of it. And I set that aside to dry, and then decided, you know what, this is still too yellow for me. So I just came in with the plain white, and I went over that. And I just kept dabbing and dabbing until I got it where I liked it. And it really knocked back the black. It took out a lot of the yellow, and it just knocked it all back, which was good since this is a background. I didn't want it to take away from what was going to come over on top of it. Here, I am just lightly going over with that sponge, and that's giving it some texture. I'm going to wipe away all of that white gesso, and now I have a clean block, and I'm coming in with that juniper, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to put that stamp pad over it. I'm going to add some white gesso to this. This is Liquitex gesso, and I will mix it up, and now I'm going to get a sort of blue-green color. I'm going to come in with a sponge, and I'm going to start adding some of that blue-green around. Now, the reason I chose this color is because when I made my photocopy of the picture of Grandpa Oliver, it turned out with this sort of juniper color ink. And I thought, you know what? Instead of fight it, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to bring that out. I'm going to add some of it with some texture. And then I'm going to go one step beyond that. And I'm going to bring in a stamp. This is an old stamp, Universal Backgrounds from Close to My Heart. It's just a simple script stamp. And I'm going to add even more of this color. And I'm going to go ahead and just bring this out. Having studied music, I learned a long time ago that if there's something that you're not comfortable with, the best way to get comfortable with it is just to do it, use it, practice it. And I wasn't real comfortable with the color in that photo. And so what did I do? I just brought it out further. And I like it. I like it now. I think it works well, and it gives a nice blend with the background. So you can see how much all of this paint, all of these layers really knocked back the Tim Holtz tissue, which was pretty dominant in the beginning. I'm going to add a little bit of fabric tack here to the gears, and then I will place it in, and you'll be able to see the embossing that I did on this piece when I flip it over here. And you will see that when you use fabric tack, you've got some wiggle room. So I got it a little bit far to the right for what I wanted. And so you'll see that I scooch it just a tiny bit here to the left. I've got a little bit of wiggle room with that adhesive. One of the reasons I like it so much. Then I'm adding some double score tape to this background piece. That's just to make sure that it really stays on the page. When you use double score tape and fabric tack, it's not going to go anywhere. I have some old scrapbooks that I used just tape on it, and some of the pictures I need to go back and I need to put them back in. So I just usually do things maybe with some overkill now, just because I want it to stay there. So that's why I do this with so many layers of adhesive. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's glue this onto the page. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this going to add a lot of bulk to this book? Yes, it will. But I will probably tear some pages out of the book, and that will give me room to add all these different pieces of paper. When I do some of the pages, like with my grandmother's, I plan on putting in some lace and some textiles. So I will definitely be adding a lot of, what am I trying to say? A lot of depth, I guess. So I'll definitely need to rip out some pages of the book. And that's why I left so many pages between this layout and the layout of my grandparents, because I want to make sure that there are plenty of pages for the layouts I want to do in the future, as well as tearing some out. Okay, so here I am just kind of laying in the pieces, and I've got Grandpa's name here. And there'll be another page where there's a picture of him and my Grandma Clara together, and I will have dates for them on that page. So for those of you who are true scrapbook historian sort of people, never fear, the dates will be here. And on that left-hand side, my plan is to just write a little blurb about him and glue it in over that page of book script. So there'll be something written over there about Grandpa Oliver, about what he did. And he was a very talented man, very artistic man. He could draw. I understand where my father got his talent. My father thought he might want to become an architect, and he did quite a bit of drawing and was quite talented. And looking back at Grandpa Oliver's work, I can see where that came from. All of my grandfathers actually were very creative men on my father's side. And my father was also very, very artistic. He could draw and paint. He was a funeral director by trade, as was his father. So they had a very, I guess you would call them sort of Renaissance men. They were very bright and had a lot of talents. So very interesting men to be around and to grow up with. All right, so I've glued those gears into place, and you saw me put some paper over the picture, and that's because I'm notorious for blobbing glue, and the last thing I want to do is blob glue on top of my photograph. Therefore, I just get a little bit of white paper, just throw it over every time I get that glue out. And then if something does, splurge out of the bottle or something, it's okay. It'll just hit that. So I'm putting my little pen in over the little jar of ink, and I'll just add some little gems around. And that pretty much finishes up my page here. Thanks so much for joining me in this little family history venture. Any questions, leave them below. I will leave you all of the information about this project in the box below, and I'll catch up with you in the next video. Bye.